Hello and welcome to Horror Boys. It's a podcast on the internet. I'm Austin, joined as always by...
Chris.
And Isaiah.
That's right, we are the titular Horror Boys. I'm using big words because I want to feel special and smart.
Oh, we're titular.
Yeah, we are. And yeah, we're talking about Wes Craven's. Well, I guess I should say what we're doing. We are a horror movie podcast. We review horror movies every week. Sometimes we're long-winded, especially when we don't like the movie. Which means today's episode, for me at least, might not be long because I enjoyed this movie. So let's jump right into this. I mean, it is also the most notes I've ever had for a movie because it is the longest movie we've ever covered. So it is the most notes. So it might.
Okay, you've said that like the past 8 movies, though.
Yeah. No, they keep getting worse.
So don't worry. These episodes will continue to go long.
It will. Today we're gonna go for about 3.5 hours, and then no, right. I'm gonna try to make sure that doesn't happen. We will see. But today, if you couldn't read the title, or maybe you are got this
blind
through your.
No.
I was gonna say maybe you just downloaded the episode on the audio platforms we're now available on, because that's right, we're now available on Spotify, iTunes, and as of yesterday, Google Play. We are available on everything. If you like podcasts, we're on that podcast app, unless you're like one of those weirdos that uses Stitcher. I'm sorry, we're not there. But we are on those 3.
What companies in Stitcher?
I don't know. But we are going to be discussing Wes Craven's new Nightmare today. The final movie in the Nightmare franchise. Kind of. It's its own thing, but also not. It's weird, and we'll discuss it. So we open on a scene that seems very familiar because it's very shot to feel a lot like the way Nightmare on Elm Street opened. We open with some hands off screen building something. Previously it was a glove. This time it's a robotic hand that looks like the knife glove. Got knives on this robot hand, and then the person who builds it after building it. This is during the credits. Thankfully, no random quote this time. I don't mind the quote. But man, my webcam is freaking out. I love when it does that. Boom, boom. Should be good now. We'll see. All right, so we open with the credits, and we have this guy who we assume it looks like Freddy. He's got his Freddy shirt on. He chops off his own hand, and oh my gosh, look at that blood effect. And wait, oh nope, someone's saying cut because we're on a movie set, which immediately shows you where this movie is. It's different. This movie is very meta. Because we are
theatrical.
We are in the real world now, and Wes Craven is here. He's directing this scene. We also noticed that Heather Langenkamp is here with her husband. It's not her real husband, but it is really Heather Langenkamp playing Heather Langenkamp, and her husband Chase, and they have a little kid named Dylan, who's also here. And also, I didn't notice when I watched this the first time, but kind of to show you that this was a dream immediately, Heather is wearing her pajamas in this scene. I didn't notice that until I watched someone else talk about it, but she is totally wearing her pajamas during this first scene because this is a dream, as we're about to find out, because this glove that Chase was working on, because he is a special effects person, which is actually based off of Heather Langenkamp's real life husband, is a special effects guy. So that was kind of adding to the
realism,
the realism,
meta-ness,
of this movie,
metacity,
and there's a lot of it. There's a couple on this first page of notes that I will explain how weirdly real parts of this movie are. But yeah, so this RoboClaw, it starts coming to life on its own. It cuts Chase's hand before then flying at, I don't remember which one's which, but the characters are Terry
the
and
other 2
Charles,
special effects guys.
Yeah, they're 2 other special effects guys, and
short-lived.
Yeah, it stabs one of them in the neck, and then kind of crawls around for a little bit, cuts another guy on the Achilles, and then cuts up his stomach, causing him to bleed a little bit. And then it goes to attack Chase, but before it can, Heather is woken up by an earthquake. Which, this is weird. This is like, I would normally say like, oh, fun fact. This is not a fun fact. This is just a weird fact that like this movie, like back in '94, there was a huge earthquake in California that happened like a couple days into filming. Like, it was already in the script. They had already shot this scene, but like there was a real life earthquake that happened that was like really big. I don't remember what the name of the earthquake was, but it's a really big one that like I think got like a 7.1 on the Richter scale, I believe. Like, it's a big boy. And this happened around the same time, which made a lot of people like on set go like, wait, what? What's going on? Is this...
Dude.
What the crap is Wes Craven doing?
Well, yes, I'm hearing Wes Craven's powers are real.
Yeah.
It's just like...
Basically.
But yeah, so she's woken up by this earthquake, and after he wakes her up, they go and they go to console Dylan, who's being freaked out by this earthquake. And we notice on Chase's hand, though, his hand is cut. Bum, bum, bum. He claims that it was due to the earthquake, but could it be that he was hurt inside the dream? No, it couldn't be. This movie takes place in reality. That's not Nancy. That's Heather. Heather. It couldn't be. Or could it? It could. That's the story. That's the plot of the movie. I'm sorry, spoilers.
And it is.
That's why you're watching this. It would be really boring if nothing was happening in this movie.
Like, nope. The end. 5 minutes.
No. But yeah. Where were we? Then we go downstairs and they have a little bit of conversation, kind of just of Chase and Heather. It's nothing like huge happens at this scene, but it's definitely like a atmospherical setting scene where we're kind of like learning about them. Like, we're learning, I believe this is where we find out that she has like a big interview later that day. We also find out that she's been getting these like harassment calls that we'll find out a little more about later as we get into it, but at this point we just know that she's getting these weird calls, and that's probably why she's on edge and why she had a nightmare last night. We also have Dylan, who makes a weird face, creepy face in his oatmeal. Ooh, what could that be? Is it Freddy? Yeah, it's Freddy. Sorry, spoilers. It is Freddy. Also, once again, not a fun fact, but a weird fact is that this story about like Heather having the weird like harassing stalker call guy thing is like based off of her real life, that like Wes like approved with her to like put in the story. Like, she was actually being like stalked due to like some TV show she was on. So like, just which probably added to like her having an outstanding performance in this movie. It's no secret if you've listened to our show, I did not like Heather Langenkamp's work in the first movie, but she already in Dream Warrior she already stepped up immensely. But this movie, she delivers maybe the best acting we've seen in all of Horror Bois' coverage. Like, she is amazing in this movie, and credit to her, she does a great. Which also, it's weird that she's amazing in a movie that like you would think would be like the hardest role to do. Playing yourself but not yourself seems like such a harder, like weird, nuanced role to be able to pull off. But honestly, everyone who does in this movie, except for like the people who aren't actors at all, do a really good job. We'll get to a couple executives who have spots who are just kind of there. Their acting is subpar. But
Dylan, one of those?
Huh? Oh, Dylan's a kid he's like okay. I think he's an okay kid. For a kid actor, I think he's fine.
I said Bob Shea under my breath.
Yeah, Bob Shea and Wes Craven are the two I'm thinking of, who just, they're kind of But
they're because they're
not actors. They're not supposed to be good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so where were we? Heather. This point, Heather tells Chase about her dreams, and he tells her that it's all a dream and there's nothing to worry about, because Freddy Krueger's not real, guys. Why? Right. What is there to be afraid of? He's just a character.
Yeah, it's a movie.
Yeah. And then Heather goes upstairs, and while she's in her room, her wall gets, due to like an aftershock, the wall breaks in a way that looks like Freddy's scratch.
Slash mark.
Ooh. Oh. And then she runs downstairs to go check on Dylan, because her little kid is there and he wants to make sure he's okay, and there was just an earthquake and he was freaked out by the last one. And well, she gets downstairs, he's not really freaked out, he's just kind of watching Nightmare 1. And when she tells him to stop and she gets over to him, he screams at her when she turns it off.
Yeah.
Yeah, because don't turn off his movie. That's rude. Rude
That's
Heather.
rude.
He was watching that. Well, actually, he was like dream walking. We find out like dream walking. That's the word I'm gonna go with. No,
Sleepwalking?
sleepwalking. Yes, yeah. And when he wakes up from sleepwalking, he screams. And I'll be honest, his screaming isn't great. I think he does deliver some of his lines well, that's what happens with kid actors. It's hit or miss. Your odds are you're not going to get a kid actor who does a great job throughout the whole thing they're doing. Occasionally you do, but for the most part,
The Shining.
yeah. The Shining. There are other examples, but yeah, The Shining is a great example. I think when it comes to kid actors, and as I've seen a lot of bad ones, this kid at least wasn't bad. He wasn't great,
All right.
but at least he wasn't bad. He never took me out of the movie, personally, at least. But yeah, so after she gets that freak out, she gets a call, and we find out that it's that's that stalker, maybe, or maybe that stalker never existed. We'll find out later, but not Heather's real one, the one in the movie. But yeah, so she gets this call, and it's someone pretending to be Freddy, saying the little Freddy jingle, trying to do a Freddy voice. I might even be Robert Englund doing it. I can't tell. It also, which isn't that surprising that he would Wes Craven maybe reuse this later. It has a very Scream vibe, obviously before Scream, because that movie comes out 2 years later. Which this movie has a lot of connections and just a lot of feelings that feel like Scream, because that's another meta work by Wes Craven. So
Wes Craven, he did Scream too.
I think he directed it, but he didn't write it. So he was part of it, but it's not fully him. I don't remember the name of the writer off the top of my head, who also deserves a lot of credit for that movie. But Wes Craven is heavily involved in Scream. I think he's the director of. I think he might be the director of the first 4. Obviously, he passed away in 2015, so he was not the director of the 5th one that just came out.
He did direct the first 4 films.
Yeah.
Let me see who the writer is. Keep going.
Okay.
Keep going.
All right. At this point, after we get the scary phone call, if the phone call does tell her that Freddy's coming.
Kevin Williamson.
Williamson. Okay, there it is. And then Julie, who is Dylan's babysitter, shows up. Who, fun fact for literally no one, but only for me, she is in one episode of Angel, the pilot episode. She's a really important character in that episode. I just love it.
Spin-off series of
Buffy the Vampire Slayer, yes. But hey, it lasted like 5 seasons, so it was successful enough that it can kind of stand on its own feet. But yeah, that's just a fun fact. That's a completely useless fun fact that she's in that first episode. And only in that first episode. She's not in the series. She's just in that episode. And I was like...
That is useless.
It is useless. But I recognized her, and I had to go look it up to find out why. Because I was like, why does she look familiar? And it's because I've seen that first season
who is this woman?
3 or 4 times, probably. But yeah, after she shows up, her and Heather while she's up, Heather gets another call, and it's, she yells at him right as she gets it, and she yells at him, hey, leave me alone. And we find out it was actually the limo driver who showed up to pick her up. It was not the crank caller. Or...
Awkward.
Awkward. 60
Yeah, it's very awkward. Poor limo driver.
Yeah.
And Dylan also, throughout this whole scene, because, we find out a little later it's because he's been having nightmares about Freddy already, seems really freaked out and doesn't, want her to leave. But, she tells him, I'll just be right back. He's got to go do this, interview. So she goes to this interview, and Heather is on this talk show where they're talking about how it's, been 10 years since the first movie, and, is there a chance of Freddy coming back? Everyone loves Freddy, and the whole crowd is dressed like Freddy, and she's telling him, I don't see myself coming back because I have a kid now, and which is kind of a theme they definitely hit on in this movie, which is the hitting on the is it okay for children to watch horror movies? Who's to blame when bad? Because that's a big thing that has been happening for pretty much the existence of horror movies is the MPAA and people saying, hey, this is bad. Kids should not be allowed to see this at all. Which I'm not going to get into the merits of if that's right, but that is definitely a central theme in this movie is them kind of tackling that. There are some very poignant lines at times where you go, okay, but yeah, we're not. But that's the theme of this scene is where we kind of get introduced to that, and we because she talks about having kids and how that doesn't want her to do anymore, which is something a lot of people have said over the years. Like I've heard interviews with horror actors who talk about once they have kids, they don't want to do horror movies anymore because they want their kids to be able to see the work they do. And yeah, so also last fun fact for a while, this is another scene that is very based off of a real time that Wes Craven and Robert Englund were on a talk show. Like it was very much like he pulled from like this instance of like a lot of the similar questions that were asked to Wes, and like having like just and I don't know, my brain is, I don't know why, but I'm just rambling more than normal.
Well, like you mentioned the social importance, and yeah, we don't have to get into that. It is also real important in the story too, as you said, because later it's called into question. Like it's important that they establish Heather, the character, would never let Dylan watch these movies, because later that's like an accusation levied against her by the doctor, and it's all tied up with the reality of Freddy.
Yeah.
In the eyes of others. So.
Exactly. And then as she's doing this interview, she gets surprised because they have another special guest. It's Robert Englund, dressed in full Freddy garb, and he's.
So
okay. Okay, sorry. And he shows up and he's getting like a full rock star treatment. Everyone's loving him, especially the kids, which makes his next line really like. He calls back to the line from 2 where he says, "You are all my children now." There's like literal children dressed like him, which is definitely.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely like something Wes Craven was going for here, because Wes Craven didn't want this Freddy to be this commercialized rock star thing. So like you're supposed to be watching this kind of from Heather's point of view, where she's watching this in like weird awe. This is a child murderer who, in Wes Craven's original script, was more than a child murderer, who now, and like in real life at this point, is being put up on this pedestal as this like rock star superhero Beatles mania-esque like entity that people love. And like it's true, people did. Like I think we talked about in the last movie, like there were kids, I think it might have been 2 movies ago, we were talking about like where they started like doing like pajamas for little kids were something that was marketed after these movies. Like that's such a crazy thing, and we should be looking at it as this crazy thing. It's weird that this character that at the very least is a child murderer, maybe more, depending on what, that's definitely, undertones as we've talked about in previous episodes. Like it's weird that he became this like superhero and like was not specifically Super Freddy. That was also weird and crappy, but I'm referencing the concept of him being...
That he became basically a rock star.
Yeah, like he was on Nickelodeon. He was on MTV. They talk about some of those other movies being the MTV version, but he was literally on MTV. Like, he is not... It's weird that Freddy Krueger became that, and this movie definitely, like, addresses that that's a weird thing. Like, I don't get me wrong, I get it. Freddy's fun. Like, I get why it happened, but it is a really weird thing when you think about it.
Yeah, I agree.
And that is the end of that scene. Now we cut to a scene backstage where Heather just wants to leave, but Robert is still being treated like a huge rock star, and all the people just want more of his autograph and stuff. Which I believe in one of the in the documentary, Heather talks about it as like very much her story, like in real life, how no one really cared about her, but everyone loved Robert. Which is just a fun little, like, allegory from her on set of filming this scene, as it reminded her of her real life, how people don't care about her, even though, realistically, she should have been the hero of those movies. And she is. But...
Yeah. In all fairness, Robert is in every single movie.
Oh, yeah, no, for sure.
She is in 2, 3?
She's in 3 of the 7, so, yeah.
Yeah.
But, no, I get it. But I could also understand... Where she's coming from, like, I don't know. It wasn't like she was like
she's the hero of the movie.
Yeah, she wasn't like she also wasn't saying this in this interview as like attacking him, being like, "Oh, I hate that Robert gets all this love." She just talked about how it felt similar Heather in the movies to Heather in real life, which is such a weird thing.
Star.
It's such a weird thing that she's Heather in this movie, because then if I want to talk about the person, I have to be like Heather in real life, because she's playing Heather Langenkamp. And they start to walk off together, and they have a little conversation. Him trying to convince her... No, not yet. Sorry. I was going to say She doesn't even know about this yet. He's just being nice to her. He's kind of like, I think he brings up the idea of like, hey, you should do another movie. We should do some more like this because he loves the attention, which makes sense. Who wouldn't want to be a rock star? And then
we also see that he just loves being monstrous.
Yeah, which is also kind of real to real life. Like he loves scaring kids and stuff. Like not in a mean way, but like, he enjoys it. He enjoys what he gets to do. And then Heather gets a call from New Line Cinema, which is the producers of all of these movies, and I believe the person she's on the phone with is the actual like producer of the first 5 movies. I don't remember the name of the woman, but she's like a legitimate like producer, and she's the one on the phone talking to her, telling her to come down to New Line to have her conversation. So once she gets to the office, she ends up having a meeting with Bob Shaye. Yes, the legendary Bob Shaye who played a leather daddy in the second movie, a teacher in the 4th movie. I don't remember which. He's had a couple appearances. And then in the 6th movie, he was the bus ticket guy. I don't remember what the term is for that. I know there is a name for that job, but I don't remember it. But now he's not playing those characters. He's playing Bob Shaye. And in this scene, we find out why Bob Shaye did not get to have that role in the second movie that he wanted, where he actually mattered, because he's not a good actor.
No, he cannot play himself very well.
He can't even play himself. In this scene, he's telling her that he wants Heather to be in this new Nightmare film that Wes Craven is writing, because Wes Craven, he mentioned that Wes Craven is having nightmares again, and Bob Shaye mentions how Wes is excited, and I actually thought this was a really funny line where like Heather thinks that he means like that she's like, about the nightmares? No, about the script he's writing. And I just thought that was like it was like oh, that's funny. Like she thought he was excited about having nightmares, but he's excited about having the script. Maybe it wasn't as funny as I thought it was, but in the moment I was like, that's a good line. I'm gonna write down that happened.
I think it's as funny as it is because it sounds just like an actual conversation someone would have, being confused about what was. Like, wait, no, he's excited about the nightmares? That's weird. No. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah, of course he's excited about the script.
Yeah. In this scene, Heather reiterates how she doesn't want to do any more horror because of Dylan. She doesn't want that, and Bob has a line that is very funny in the moment, but also really, really weird when we unpack it. Bob Shaye, the legitimate producer of a lot of horror movies, says, well, kids like horror, when she says she doesn't want to do it because she has a kid. Which is such a weird line for some, like, he's a character in this movie. But he is playing himself, who you would think that a producer of a giant horror franchise would not want to admit that they're rated R adult movies, not adult, but rated R movies made for adults are not targeted at children. But in a sense, he kind of is admitting that. It's weird. It's a really weird scene when you break it down, like, to the real life implication of that. Like, here's the thing: we all know that. Obviously, like every one of these movies, at the very least, is made to hopefully get teenagers into the theaters. But it is weird that for him to say kids like horror, because it's true. A lot of people like grew up on horror. I wasn't one of them. We've discussed that in the first episode. But people grow up on horror, and I don't think it's that bad. I think a lot of people turn out fine, obviously. But it is weird to have a literal executive admit it in a film.
That's our core audience.
We want kids to like it.
We're making for Dylan.
Kids love horror. All those 7-year-olds.
Yeah.
What do you think we put all those naked women in there for?
It's just like, and that's like one of those things that like these executives and stuff can typically point at whenever like the MPA or parents groups would come at them being like, see, you're doing this bad thing, you're corrupting our children. And they can go like, well, you see, they're rated R movies. We obviously don't want kids to be there. But then in this movie, playing himself, says, well, no, kids love horror. It's like,
they're for kids. Yeah.
Whoa. It is a trippy scene when you break it down. In the moment, it's a funny little line, but when you really think about it, it's like, oh, crap.
Oh.
What? Okay. All right, Bob Shaye. And thankfully, we're not done. Sorry, I was going to say thankfully we're done with Bob Shea in this movie, but we do have a couple more lines from him here where he tells her how, trying to get her on board with this, telling her how Chase has already been working on it and how he's been working on this new glove prop for them, which freaks out Heather because it reminds her of her dream from the opening. Like, oh, wait, what? Because, yeah. And, yeah, so then she gets on the phone after that and she calls... Sorry, no, I'm wrong. I'm jumping a little bit too ahead. She then talks about how, after that, she kind of just gets kind of weird and, like, asks him about, like, how if he's been having any weird phone calls or any nightmares himself as his phone rings and he won't pick it up. It felt like a powerful scene, but then when you really think about it, I don't know if it was. Like, it felt like because he then throws in the line about how, oh, that's not my job to pick it up. But there's also...
Well, yes.
There's a moment, though, where they frame it where it seems like he's also scared to pick it up. And maybe that was a coincidence. Maybe it was something they didn't delve deep enough into. But it just felt like, it's like, okay, so is he also getting weird phone calls? But
I don't think it was a coincidence. I think we were meant to be left with that same reaction you just had. Like, is he getting, it just fits with the pace of the movie because they're still kind of building up that pressure.
Yeah, setting everything up to come crashing down on you.
Yeah, a pace which I love, but could understandably say might be a little slow. We don't, spoiler, we don't see Freddy until an hour and 8 minutes into this hour and 52-minute film, which maybe we could have cut a tiny bit to just maybe make it not almost 2 hours for a slasher film. It's a little excessive, but when all of it's, except for like one scene, in my opinion, which we'll get to when we get to it, was great. I don't mind. Like, I enjoyed almost all of this movie, so... But it is a little long, so like to, play devil's advocate, I'll point out one of the flaws people have with it, and that I can understand why they have it. It is a little long and a little slow as it starts.
Dude, yeah. I like this movie. Spoil the part at the end that we do, but I will admit, like Jerry Seinfeld says, short and long for movies are just kind of code for good and bad. So if it feels long, that's another way of just saying, oh, the movie's bad because it didn't hold your attention. And this movie did hold my attention, but it did occur to me about 40 minutes through the movie or so, like, where's Freddy?
Yeah.
But nonetheless, like Chris said, they're kind of setting up. I mean, they're giving excuses for all of these scary phenomena to also just be like real coincidences. Like, oh, it's the earthquake, but those scrapes in the wall and so forth. And in this case, it's like, oh yeah, nobody answers the phone. We're a big company. We get a lot of phone calls. And those excuses just kind of dissolve as the movie progresses.
Yeah. Heather then, she goes home to Dylan, who screams himself awake again, because that's his thing. He likes to scream himself awake.
And, who doesn't, really? Most people? Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
As Heather holds him, he tells her to never sleep again in a creepy voice. That, to be fair, Chris pointed out in the moment, and I heard someone else point it out as well. I didn't really notice it when it first happened, but it is a little Donald Duck-esque for this, especially this specific one. He does a little bit better later on of just doing a creepy voice, but this one does come a little Donald Ducky.
Yeah. A lot.
I don't think it's a lot, because I didn't even notice until you said it.
Well, I'm a man of voices, Austin. That's my
I
job.
also love voices. How dare you?
Well, it's not my job, but maybe one day it might be. Could be.
We also find out, because this is all happening in his room, and he's being woken up from that nightmare, we find out that, oh no, Rex was cut in Dylan's dream. He's all torn up a little bit. And Dylan's obviously really, sad, because is Rex dead? But no, don't worry, Nance tells him he's not. Rex is not going to die. He's going to be fine. Because, and as we find out later in that scene, from Dr. Julie herself, Dr. Julie and Dr. Dylan are going to be on this case, and they're going to stitch him back together, and he's going to be fine. They're not going to do anything to poor Rex. They're not. They are. Yeah. Spoiler, they will. And it's weird that it actually is a little sad. Power to this movie that they actually make me care about a stuffed animal. But yeah, Heather calls Chase and wants him to come home, but he can't because Chuck and Terry weren't able to make it that day. Did they die? Kind of. You find out later that they did, but it's honestly in a weird way. That's a very small nitpick, a slight disappointment that we find out that they die off screen, like in a couple scenes. But it's like, oh.
Well, they didn't really die off screen.
I guess, did they die in her dream at the beginning? Maybe.
Yeah.
Like, but that's like something.
Yeah, it's very clearly implied.
Yeah.
Is it?
I don't know, because it happened so much later that like
yeah.
It's like it's a weird.
Well, they don't
thing.
Reveal their deaths till later because no one knew where they died at.
Yeah, but they should have just died at their house, you would think, or something, and they would have been found by people. I don't know.
Yeah, they're two single men.
Well, that's fair. Yeah.
Presumably.
How dare you? Terry is definitely a happily married man. You could tell just by looking at him. That man had married energy.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, me neither. But yeah. He tried after he's not responsive of coming home at first, but she tells him that Dylan was acting like Freddy, and that the glove, and then so he agrees to come, and he comes home, or heads home, and as he leaves, we cut back into his workshop that he was working on. He was working on that glove, and
cut back into it. Oh, that's clever. And the hand's gone. Whoa.
Sure, yeah, it wasn't meant to be clever, but sure, I meant. Cut back into it. It's a funny pun. But yeah, so after the glove's gone, we cut back to Heather, who is telling Dylan a bedtime story. The scene goes on for a little while, but once again, in a way that doesn't feel like it does. She tells him a lot of the Hansel and Gretel story before kind of realizing that the Hansel and Gretel story is kind of a messed up story to tell kids, like most fairy tales, because they're pretty, jacked up. And
any of the ones from the Brothers Grimm fairy tale books are all very dark.
Yeah, which to be fair is probably a commentary that Wes Craven is purposely trying to make here, saying, stop blaming me for your kids having problems when you've been telling them these horrible stories since they were little children. I mean, and he's kind of right though. Like, some of these stories are screwed up and they've been slightly Disneyified, where you go, oh, they're not because of the Disney movies and stuff. But even the Disney movies, most of them are still kind of like, wait, what? Who's trying to kill that kid in that movie? Because that's most of the movies. Which, I think that's a kind of a... I respect the pointing out the hypocrisy. It's something that I don't like when people point to try to scapegoat problems in society with one thing. It happened with video games after what happened in Colorado. I don't even know if I can say the name of what happened in Colorado without us getting flagged, but back in 2001?
You guys know.
Yeah.
Well, actually, maybe. Depending on your age, you probably...
You might not know, but the people who did a horrible thing in Colorado there...
9/11.
No, not what I was referencing.
Not quite. Was at a school?
It was at a school. Some bad things happened. Those people who did that bad thing happened to also like video games. And that was one of the many times that they tried to blame video games for that. Which, it happens with movies. It happens with a lot of things. But as they kind of point out here, society as a whole is kind of messed up. So maybe don't stop trying to point fingers at one thing that you don't like because you want to change that one thing. I think that was on purpose. Maybe I'm wrong, but knowing the rest of the way this movie is and how metaphorical it is about other things, I think I probably am reading into at least somewhat what Wes Craven was trying to do with this scene.
Well, at the very least, we're meant to draw a parallel between the fairy tales and the horror movies. That's just explicit.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
So yeah, after she decides to stop though because she realizes that the story's too violent, she goes like, "Hey, we can't do this," and she stops it. In one of the scenes, I think where little kid does a great job, he recites the rest of the story verbatim from what we actually saw on the page earlier while she was reading. They did a cool shot showing you what's about to come up. So then when he gets to that, gets to the line, you're like, "Oh crap!" He's I'm in my head was thinking okay, then he's gonna say the thing about the witch at the end because that was at the end of the page, and he said the line and he did it in a creepy voice, and then not fully creepy, not his creepy voice, he's not going full.
He's not going full Donald.
He's not going full Donald. He's not full Donald Duck in it, which we can't say full Donald Duck in it because that's a different thing according to the Kevin Bacon from Friday the 13th Part 1. That's where you just wear a shirt and no clothes under it. That's Donald ducking it. So the kid was not Donald ducking it. I want to make sure that is clear. This kid was not Donald ducking it. He was just doing a Donald Duck voice. I gotta make sure that's clear. We have lore from the Horror Bois channel that we have to make sure we cover here, so people don't think something else happened.
I forgot about that lore.
It hasn't come up.
Only use that phrase once ever.
Because it hasn't come up again. Trust me, I will bring it up again if it ever comes up. That's just not a thing that actually happens often.
Why we pointed it out, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so after he recites that, he like grabs her arm and like tells her like he needs to know the rest of the story, and it kind of like it's a well done kind of creepy scene. You're like, oh, okay, this kid's getting messed up by something. And he asks her how they got home, and she tells him about how after they killed the witch, they, left breadcrumbs and made it their way home. And he adds a part of the story that I do not believe is from the Brothers Grimm tale about how once they got home, they got kisses from their mom and were told they were loved. I don't think that's accurate. I don't remember that part, but it maybe is foreshadowing for something later in this movie.
Oh.
Yeah. So then we also find out as she's about to leave, he kind of tells her a little bit more about how as she's about to leave, she realizes like there's something under his covers down towards the bottom, and she's like, what's this? And she goes under the covers with him, and she finds out that's Rex. He puts him there because Rex protects him from the man with the claws.
The mean man.
Yeah.
And he keeps him down there.
Yeah.
Under the bed,
yeah.
Presumably.
Yes, he keeps him from coming and attacking him in his sleep. And there's also like a little line as she's leaving about how, Dad will make his way home because he'll find the breadcrumbs. And he goes, and then the kid, another kind of creepy line delivery goes, I don't know the exact line, but he basically says, unless the birds eat the breadcrumbs. And then we cut to the metaphorical birds eating the breadcrumbs because, spoiler, Chase ain't making his way home. And he is on his way, but he makes the mistake of falling asleep in a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. So he nods off on his way home. And one of, sadly, a very awkward moment, not even a bad scene, but just a awkward moment due to this being from 94, we have some awful digital claws come from his chair, and they like tap him on the crotch awkwardly, and then he scratches off. That's not the one I'm talking. I'm not even talking about the weird awkward touching his crotch, which is weird. I'm talking about just they look like crap because they're digital in 94. It happened,
do look terrible.
Yeah, it happened. Sadly, that's what happened. This was cutting edge at the time. Cutting edge, because then those claws, after they tap him on the crotch, they rip out his like chest. Or do they? Because what? Nancy wakes up. So I guess he wasn't asleep.
So she dreamed
this is all a dream, obviously. So she's gonna go downstairs, and
there's somebody at the door, and it's the cops.
Hey, we're not there yet. There is a whole nother scene.
But it's the cops.
We're not there yet.
Yeah.
She goes downstairs, and once she's downstairs, she sees Dylan, who asks her if she's scared. And this is where he talks about how that Rex's fighting woke him up. And then the cops show up, and we find out that it's because Chase is dead. Yeah. Gosh, don't you dare cut out Rex lore. Rex is the best part of this movie, and you try to cut out his lore of him fighting. I love Rex.
Rex is just an intermediary object between Dylan and Freddy. That is all he was to me.
Rex is amazing, and I'm not going to take this slander. But
yeah, the gate guardian.
Yeah, he's the guardian. Rex is the guardian. I agree.
But his power only comes from Dylan's attribution.
Okay.
Like Dylan just kind of attributes personality to Rex.
Rex is really cool dinosaur.
If Dylan was afraid of Rex would be attacking him in the dream. Think about it that way.
Yeah, but he wasn't because Rex is awesome and saved his life.
Okay. We should just do a whole podcast about
Rex. I'll do
Rex
it.
Alone.
I'll do it. A whole podcast about Rex. That's what this one is, isn't it?
A monologue. No.
Isn't this just a Rex review?
All right, I'll be leaving. You have fun with your Rex podcast.
Yeah.
I lost my place because we were talking about Rex too much.
He got too excited talking about Rex. So the police come and tell them that Chase is dead.
Yes. After they find that, she goes to the morgue, or what's the other word that it could have been? It might have been coroner's office. I don't know which one it is. I think it's the morgue.
It'd be the morgue.
Yeah. And she goes in there to, see the body because she wants to confirm that it's, what happened, because she's got her suspicions at this point, obviously.
A snacking mortician. Once again.
We do have a snacking mortician.
A lot of morticians eating stuff.
It's really it's a trope. Bodies. It's a trope in horror movies, and it's a weird trope that I don't know why it started.
Morticians gotta eat too.
But why?
He's thankfully not an apathetic mortician. He's he's pretty courteous.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't want to see this.
Yeah, he tries to only show her the face real quick because, she wants to see.
Gotta confirm that it's him.
Yeah, but she then says, hey, I want to see it again, and then pulls it down further. See more. And she sees the cuts, and she turns and pukes. And then he's, sympathetic and, talks her through it, hey, sometimes it's better to not see things. Which, it's a little late for that. She already saw it. But, sure, he tried. To be fair, there are a lot of bad corners. We watched Friday the 13th 4. There are some bad... Not Friday. Yeah, Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter.
Yeah.
There are some bad corners out there. This is not one of them.
He corned his best.
Yeah.
I'll be back in 10 seconds. My chili's burning, so...
Oh, baby,
I'll just keep going. Yeah, keep
going. Where were we?
Old Isaiah chili lord.
After she pukes at
they're talking with the coroner.
After she pukes at the reveal, we head to Chase's funeral, which is full of cameos. There are
that's true.
Yeah, there's there's the ones we've already seen in the movie. We also the first time we see
Wes Craven?
No, Wes Craven was in the opening scene. John Saxon.
I guess he was. Oh, that's true.
John Saxon into this scene. I don't remember the actor's name, but he plays Rod in the first movie, is in just this scene. I believe there is the replacement Kristen from Nightmare 4 is in this scene for some reason. There is multiple cameos in this scene, and it gets really windy though for a minute, and then becomes an earthquake. We find out later, which I guess explains this away a little bit, because this scene was a little jarring for me at first. I'm like, wait, did the wind turn into an earthquake? And my brain was, are earthquakes? It's is heavy winds part of earthquakes? I've never been in an earthquake. Is that a normal thing? We do find out later that none of these earthquakes have happened, for the most part. They're all just for her, except for the first one. So maybe that explains it. But in the moment, I was like, wait, what? Okay, it's really windy. That's weird. Oh, wait, no, now it's an earthquake. Is that normal? I was taken aback there for a second. I was like, is that part of earthquakes? I don't know earthquake. I don't know my earthquake lore. So,
most people don't. It's fine.
Yeah. But yeah. So after that happens, after it this earthquake's crazy. It makes the casket fall in and open, and then she realizes that Dylan's missing. So she goes to look for him in the casket because we find out in a minute that she's has a concussion in this. She's knocked out during this. But yes, she goes to look for him. She sees him down there. Oh no, he's getting pulled down by Freddy. She's able to catch him just in time, but she also, while she's saving her kid, she's also getting a weird, vision of her undead husband, yeah. And what did he tell her? I wrote it down.
He's grasping at her.
Yeah. And he tells her to stay with
me.
Stay with me.
Yeah.
And then she gets shooken awake by John Saxon, who then consoles her and, tells her that, hey, you hit your head. There was no earthquake. What are you talking? I think he tells her there's no earthquake. I don't remember. He tells her hey, it's fine. Don't worry about it. It's a good scene. Honestly, every scene John Saxon's in this movie is great. He's a great actor, and he does a great job in this movie. We also have Robert Englund come up, and he gives her his condolences and tells her, hey, if you ever need anything, I'm always here for you. Very nice little scene. And then we cut to later in the night, and Heather's having trouble sleeping, and then she decides to go downstairs because I think she hears a noise. and she finds Dylan watching Nightmare 1 again. This kid is not respecting her. He is disobeying her. She doesn't turn it off. Wait, she doesn't turn it off? Oh yeah, she doesn't turn it off. I remember writing this because it felt weird to me after how she wanted to turn it off so quickly the first time. This time she kind of just lets it run for a little bit and starts having a conversation with him while it's still playing. And then because she wants to talk to him though, that does cause him to scream himself awake because that is one of the 2 things this actor does. He screams himself awake, and he's adorable with his little T-Rex doll. That's about his 2 things he does. And
he's sometimes Donald Duck.
He does sometimes Donald. He does also do creepy Freddy voice occasionally, which comes across.
He does not Donald Duck.
No,
as a verb, he does not Donald.
No. After that, Dylan walks away, and he starts singing the Freddy song, which we find out he learned from under the covers from the kids, from the singing kids, which is the only way that those characters are in this movie, which is kind of weird because they've been in every other movie.
Yeah. They're not visually here.
Yeah, they're not visually here, but we do get a reference of them, so I guess count that. It'll work. It's those little kids that get to show up. I just want to know was the singing boy there who was introduced in 4 there? Because I know he wasn't allowed to be in those first 3 movies, so I want to know if he was allowed to be in this movie's unseen scene.
No. One of the other things that wasn't included in this movie, or is it? Oh,
I don't know what we're talking about.
This is a reference to something else.
Yeah, we can just get to that. We can get to that when we get to it. I have a whole thing about it when it happens. We don't need to weirdly tease it.
I know. I remember you loudly saying the words that you were writing down as it happened.
And then little Dylan gets a bloody nose, and he tells her that Freddy is trying to get to their world. And as they cut away from that scene, we do notice, though, that the TV was unplugged the whole time.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, my
Classic
goodness.
horror movie trope.
Yes. Now we cut
Just like that toaster.
Yeah. This is also worth noting is that this Nightmare movie feels like the first genuine, horror movie since probably the first one.
Dude.
No,
maybe the second.
I feel like the second one definitely has
in a long time.
The second one definitely has some very horror elements, but I think this movie. Well, I'll tell you what I think about this movie when we get to the end. Stick around.
It is meant to scare.
We cut to in bed with Heather and Dylan sleeping with her because after everything that's going on, and Heather tells Dylan that his father is in heaven with God, and Dylan gets a really existential, asking her about the nature of God and why God lets bad things happen, and it's
the problem of evil.
Yeah, it's geez, we're gonna talk about that in. Okay, I mean, we don't really. We just kind of get that one little line, and she tells him. He also asks her if you can see God without going to heaven, and she says that she thinks you can through prayer. And the scene kind of ends with Dylan asking her to come into his dreams with him to help him, keep him safe. But she tells him that you can't, and you can only do that in the movies. Which this is a movie, so I guess she could do.
Well, and on top of that, it's a complicated line. The movie is all about how she falsely thought certain things could only happen in movies. And her dream, as I noted earlier, she wakes up coinciding with the death of her husband.
Yeah.
Was she in that dream? It's not really quite clear. But...
So you got a point, but I think she's also to be fair, just trying to console her kid and not trying to scare him with the fact that she thinks some of the stuff is happening for real. Is kind of
is this also the scene where she just immediately drinks some coffee as soon as he goes to sleep? Right? Or am I thinking of later in the movie?
I might be here. I don't know exactly where she decides to stop sleeping, but it might be here. Now we cut to the morning, or the next day, I guess, but whatever. Dylan is playing at the park, and while he's playing at the park, we have a scene with Heather talking.
Talking to Jan.
Yeah. Okay. I thought you were correcting me, and you were just finished. You did it in the middle of me saying. I was like, "What, did I say something wrong?" I said Heather.
No. Oh, no.
No. Okay.
For a second there, you were struggling to come up with the name.
No, I wasn't.
So I thought I would help.
I wasn't though. I was reading. It's on my paper. Heather was talking to John Saxon. I have it right here.
Yeah.
About how
just
talking about Dylan's weird behavior, and he kind of consoles her, and he also kind of asks her like, "Hey, maybe do you have any like mental illness in your family? Is there any maybe reason this is happening? Maybe?" And we do find out that she did have someone in her family, and she kind of goes, "Hey, maybe that's it." And he's like, "Hey, if everyone who has someone who's mentally ill in their family was going to be affected by it, the whole world would be mentally ill." And it's like, he's got a point. Everyone knows someone. And while this is happening, though, we cut back and forth with John telling Heather it's all because of the stalker that she's been dealing with. We also cut back and forth to, I think, a absolutely artistically amazing scene as we have Dylan running his hand on the playground equipment, and it's the sound design is so eerily similar to when Freddy is in the boiler room in the first movie, the way he's hitting the bars and the way he opens there's a gate at the top of this weird rocket ship thing, but yeah, it all has such similar sound design from that first movie, and I feel like there's no way Wes Craven doesn't make mistakes. He has. I mean, maybe he makes mistakes. He's made some bad movies.
Oh, that.
But I mean in the sense of he doesn't make.
He doesn't do things on accident.
Yes, he doesn't do things on accident. This was on purpose.
That's really cool. I didn't notice that.
Also, fun fact, real quick, before we get to the end of this scene, because it kind of leads into later scenes. Just the actor who played Dylan, when they were filming this scene at the playground, they found out that they were going to be tearing down the playground, so his family got a truck and took that playground, and it was in his backyard for the rest of his growing up. This playground, he got to keep this playground because it was just going to get thrown away. So nice. That's our first and really only purely fun fact of my fun facts. Most of the other ones were sadly depressing, connected to real life tragedies.
The depressing fact is that's actually how they paid him for this movie.
Oh, I don't think so.
On Playground.
I mean, to be fair, he probably got none of the money because that's how being a child actor in the world works. But we want to make it depressing. He probably did. You're right. That's probably the only payment he got from this. But
yeah.
As the scene ends, though, he climbs to the top of the playground and he's reaching to the sky, and he eventually. At this point, Heather and John realize what's happening. They run to him, and as they're running to him, he falls. But Heather does catch him at the last second. And once again, in a line that is way too powerful for any horror movie to deserve to have, Dylan says that God wouldn't take him. And it broke me. And I was like, oh, it's so... It doesn't deserve to be here. This is a great movie. I love this movie. But, no horror movie deserves to make me feel the way this line made me feel. But yeah. Then Heather gets a creepy letter in the mail, which is literally a letter. It is also sent in the mail, but it is also a literal creepy alphabetic letter.
One letter, yeah.
That she puts in her drawer with her other creepy alphabetic letters. Because we all have that creepy alphabet letter drawer. No, okay, she's been getting these. That's been part of the stalker. Is actually Freddy. We find out later, I guess. Maybe.
Oh, yeah, spoil it.
The thing is, I spoil it, but I don't, because it's never it's said in a sense of at moment, but it's weird. Because I don't know if we're supposed to think that none of this ever actually happened to her. I don't know. Has Freddy been messing with her for months? Maybe. I don't. Or 6 weeks, I think, is maybe the line that this said, the exact time frame. But
however long Wes Craven's been working on the script.
Yeah, and maybe that's it.
Well, yeah, it's never we learned conclusively that the evil spirit inhabits Freddy in a real way.
Yeah,
and he's in the real world, but that doesn't rule out that
he was possessing someone here, maybe to do this stalking. Who knows? Who knows? I do believe that in one of the early
go on some wild theories.
I do believe in one of the early drafts. This is obviously they did not make it to the movie and isn't really there at all anymore. Julie was actually the one who was doing all of the other stuff. Obviously, that is not in this movie at all. But
not at all, yeah.
But apparently that would have been an explanation for this, how did this happen part. is at one point maybe there was an explanation, but this movie is an hour and 52 minutes, so they had to cut something.
Yeah, I think it's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
It just was a result of the dream Freddy, and none of it was actually real, but also part of it was kind of real.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I also completely am fine with this, but I want to, do my due diligence and bring up possible plot holes, because if we're going to crap on the crappy movies, we should also give the same analytical eye to the good movies.
Or I'm going to crap on the movie when we get to the end of the, how we felt about it.
Where were we? She gets the creepy letter. Then Heather calls Robert and tells Robert about her more evil Freddy nightmares. And first he's like, "Oh, you're having nightmares of me?" She's like, "No, he's darker. He's more evil." And he goes, he adds, "He's darker," because we find out at the end of this scene, even though he doesn't tell her this, and I think this is the last time we see Robert Englund in this movie, as Robert Englund. Like, he's still in the movie, but like, we don't see him as Robert Englund later, because Robert Englund isn't the star of this movie. Well, he is. You know what I'm saying. Robert Englund, the character, isn't the star of this movie. Heather Langenkamp, the character, is. So this is the last time we see Robert, and because as we see him in his last shot, we see that he's actually been painting a dark version of this movie, which I believe this is accurate. I could be talking out of my butt. Fun fact, I believe he legitimately painted that, because I believe that is something he is a legitimate, like, painter. Like, he loves to paint. Like, I think all those paintings of that scene were painted by him. I could be wrong.
That's cool.
I don't want to give him more credit than the man deserves. He's already an artist as an actor. I don't want to also add in artist as a painter, but he might be. But yeah, so then we also find out that in this scene that Wes has gotten to the point of the script where Dylan tries to reach God, which, to be fair, I don't feel like had enough of a reaction from Heather, this character. Maybe it was a scene that was cut or something, but like, I feel like that would be that moment where you get like the wait, what kind of moment from her, but there really isn't. We just kind of let that be the last line in the scene. And I just thought that was a little jarring to me. I was like, she just found out that this is definitely from Wes' script. Like, there's no doubt. Dude. How else would he know that Dylan was reaching for God? Like, but whatever. Now it's nighttime, and Dylan is, doing some creepy walking around downstairs, while Heather's room creaks a bunch, and Freddy starts to tear up her sheets, and is about to claw her face when she gets woken up by Dylan dropping silverware. So she goes downstairs, and she walks up on him, and he's singing the Freddy song, and as he's getting to the last part, we notice that he has made his like own Freddy glove, kind of, by taping knives to his hand. So as he gets to, the 9-10 never sleep again part, he goes to slash her face. But she is woken up for real this time by falling out of her bed in the morning. After she wakes up, she goes downstairs to find Dylan, who is just repeating, "Never sleep again." He also, during his sleepwalking, he also put out the message from the letters we saw earlier, as they say, "Answer the phone." And then the phone rings immediately. And she answers it, and as she goes to answer it, and it's like a lot of times in this movie, and I think does really well, we get a call back to the first movie of it like becoming a tongue and kissing her, or licking her, I guess. But from like in the first movie, that's where he said, it happens in the first movie. I don't know, I'm trying to like explain the scene, but it's pretty much the same thing. There's no reason to explain it here. But yeah. So, then Dylan starts to, foam at the mouth, as well as, after that, we cut back to the phone, and it's foaming. It's the last shot of this scene. I don't know what that's supposed to mean with the phone foaming, but it's foaming. And it felt like they put the emphasis on that as the final shot, so it's supposed to be important. I can't tell you why, but it's supposed to be important, the phone being foaming. Then we cut to a hospital where there's a doctor who is blaming horror movies on Dylan's new catatonic-esque state, like his non-responsive state, and she's blaming horror movies on this. And fun fact, I guess, I think this one's closer to a fun fact, the character, I don't remember the name of the character, but the doctor's character's name has the same name as a bigwig guy at the MPAA, which is why her character is basically reiterating all the things like the MPAA would say to like horror directors about how horror movies are corrupting children, this, that. She is very much playing the role of the MPAA in a way that makes more sense in this movie.
Interesting.
So yeah.
Also, fun fact, I looked it up, did a little digging. Robert Englund does not paint at all.
Oh, he doesn't?
At all.
Okay.
He is a surfer dude and wanted to be polishing a board in that scene.
My bad. I stand corrected. I apologize to giving Robert Englund credit for something he does not do. I'm glad they went with this and not the surfing, though. That would have been really weird in that scene.
It would have been a little bit awkward. He polishes his board, and
now it's a picture of Freddy. Like, what?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
It would have been a lot funnier. Maybe for like Nightmare 6.
That feels like a Nightmare 4 moment, like when he was on the beach. That should have happened then. That should have been when he got to do it. After the sunglasses, he polishes a board, but he didn't do that. So,
thankfully.
We also as she's still sitting there with Dylan. We do overhear from her point of view the one of the nurses or the talking to the doctor, and we find out that Dylan is showing signs of schizophrenia. And Dylan wants Rex to feel safe, but Rex was left at home. So Heather tells him that, hey, you gotta get good, gotta get better, so I can take you home and get Rex. Which we find out later that she actually never gets him Rex, but she says she's going to get him Rex and bring him to him much later, but for some reason doesn't suggest doing that in this scene, which felt weird to me. Like, I don't know what parent would go, well, get better, kid, if you want to see your stuffed animal that makes you feel safe. It's like, what? Like, it just felt like a little weird. Like, she's, for the most part, a very, like, loving mother character in this movie, to then just go, all right, get better, and then you can have Rex home. Okay, the kid wants Rex to feel safe. You can't go get him Rex? All right. Especially when you already at this point are kind of figuring out that this might be real, and he thinks Rex is keeping him. Like, whatever. She does not offer to go get Rex yet. And as
the search for Rex is kind of a climax of the movie.
It is.
So they got to put it off to the right point. If you want to put it that way,
I get it as like from a screenwriting point of view, to a point. It just does kind of make her. It's a weird character choice for her at this moment.
It's a good point.
And as she's about to leave, the doctor does give him a sleeping pill to help him go to sleep so he can get some rest. But we find out as she's leaving, he did not take the sleeping pill and he hides it under her bed.
Well, naughty little guy, not taking his medication. Wow.
Yeah.
It's like he doesn't want to die or something. Weird.
And then after we leave, we get a little montage almost of Heather driving, and she's going past a bunch of rubble from, or like not rubble, but like some of it is like it's the results of the earthquake, and this is legitimately the results from the earthquake that happened in '94 in California, like, which is such a like weird added thing where they were able to add this scene that like adds a lot of like levity and like realness to this. Is like, oh crap, that's like those are destroyed buildings. And like in the news footage way earlier that we didn't mention because it didn't matter at the time, once again they showed real footage of the actual damage from the earthquake that happened during the making of this movie. It was
the Northridge earthquake, by the way.
Yes. Which just crazy coincidence that really, I mean, added at least this one scene to the movie that made it feel a lot more real. And I think it works. And then she's driving, though. Where's she driving to, though? She's driving to Wes Anderson's house. And now we get
Wes Craven, even.
Wes Craven, you're right. I said Wes Anderson, not Wes Anderson at all.
Yeah.
The director,
very different directors.
Yeah, totally
very different.
Yeah. But I really want to see a Wes Anderson horror film now because I feel like it would be really pretty.
Animated and whimsical.
Only like one or two of his movies are animated, but they're all very symmetrical. It would be a very symmetrical horror film.
So The Shining.
Maybe that was Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
Are we sure Wes Anderson isn't a time traveler? But yeah, so she's at Wes Craven's house, and this is the scene that this is my opinion, the only scene I don't like in this whole movie. I love everything else about this movie.
Kind of the worst scene in the movie.
I love everything else about this movie, but we get a scene where Wes Craven decides to. He explains why everything is going on in a way that feels, in my opinion, it seems like we do have a differing opinion, which is nice. I like when we have differing opinions on this.
I don't.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, I do differ.
Don't worry.
Well, then Isaiah, you have two choices: agree with me, or that's it. That's your only choice, or disagree. Because if you don't want to disagree, you have to agree with me because I'm not changing my opinion.
I think I can explain it in a way that will sway Isaiah to our side.
Okay.
So they have this whole explanation, right, where Wes Craven tells Heather why everything's happening, and the origin of who and what Freddy is. And to put it in the simplest baseline terms, Freddy is an evil who can only be stopped by being put in movies. And I think that's pretty really dumb, actually. That is the only way you can stop Freddy.
Well, you can put him in any story,
movies.
Chris. Any story. That's how the evil was trapped before movies. It can also be storytellers, which also, here's the thing. I think he deserves it for the most part, but it is a little there is a line where we talk about, like, the best storytellers are able to do it, which is a little, like...
Self-aggrandizing?
Yeah, like, all right, Wes, okay.
I would say a little bit.
You did a great job. Like, I do love this movie, but let's settle down with And I feel like my problem with this is it's similar to things we've talked about before. It's why I didn't like Friday the 13th part, Jason Goes to Hell. It's why I didn't like the Amanda Kruger part of 3 or like any of 4, 5, and 6. I don't want to know why sometimes. Sometimes it's better to not know why. Giving me this, well, he's actually this great entity that's existed forever, and here's how he works, and I've figured out how he works. It's like, why? Like, there's a simple, like, I feel like there's a simple way out if you still need, like, Wes Craven to be in the scene to explain why he's writing this. He could just say, oh, I just write what's in my nightmares. And, actually, we could literally have a line based off of the real story of why he made the first one, about how, it's a little touchy, but have him, in this movie, say that the reason that those Southeast Asian kids died was because Freddy's been real the whole time. Why not? Like, we're in this movie where Freddy exists and is killing, like, Freddy's always been real, and he's had these nightmares of him, and you just kind of put it on paper. And we didn't have to give this mystical explanation for how Freddy got his power again. And, like, here's the thing.
This part just feels so silly in comparison to the rest of the movie.
No. I feel like that's only the case because, in the way that you've said it, it was in a silly tone. It's because, like, movies, in the way that you said it, are, like, a silly thing. But I see what Craven's trying to do here with saying, like, movies don't have to be silly, movies...
no, they don't.
They can tell real stories that have meaning. And so whether or not, like, this premise is silly, I think depends on the caliber of the movie you're thinking of.
So that being said, 2 through 6 of the movies are all goofy garbage.
Yes, they are.
And him saying that only the greatest storytellers can capture them, I think is a fat load of BS. Wes Craven needs to get off his pedestal just a little bit. Does he make a lot of cool stuff? Yeah. And has he? Yes. Are most of the Nightmare movies those things? No.
You were right. You were right about that. I'll tell you that right now.
So I think within context, it is very dumb. Out of context, and regarding other films, yeah, sure, maybe.
I think I still stand by what I said, even if every Nightmare film was high art,
a masterpiece.
Yeah, I'd still be like, I just don't want this. It's the fact that this is supposed to be in the real world. So to try to give me this real weird mystical lore about how, which we haven't even discussed yet, how she's a gatekeeper to stop him, and there's always a gatekeeper that can stop the entity, and like how it has to be her because the first time he wrote a movie with Freddy, that was because he used Nancy to stop him in the movie. Therefore, she has to be the one to stop him in real life. It's like, what? Okay, fine. And I will say, we'll move on from crapping on this scene, because, like I said, this is my literal only flaw. Well, we pointed out very small flaws, but, like, this is the only scene that at all almost even took me out of the movie. And here's the thing. I got right back into it, because this movie's great. This scene literally ends awesomely.
Then we don't really bring anything back up from it anywhere after it. Well, kind of.
It explains
Except for, like, the climax.
Yeah, it explains how Wes Craven wrote all of this, and there's some script scenes later. But I will say, one of the things that I think is really cool and well done here is the scene ends with showing that the, like, last 3 bits of dialogue in that were on his computer screen, including the words "fade to black" as we fade to black. I love that level of meta. Like, I love so much about what this movie does. And maybe that's why I have so much of a flaw with that other scene, is because I loved everything else. And if I only kind of liked everything else, maybe this scene wouldn't feel as out of place to me. But I love so much of the other stuff he's doing in this movie. So, yeah. Now we cut to Heather doing some good old-fashioned research. She has a little montage almost of reading about sleep deprivation and psychology. And she finds out that, her kid's probably sleep deprived, and that's why it's happening. Which, okay, haven't the characters known about sleep deprivation since, like, the first movie being a possible cause of all this? But alright, she figured it out. It's sleep deprivation, and while she's doing her little montage, we also find out on the screen that Chuck and Terry, they were found dead. They're dead now. And maybe they've been dead since the first scene. Maybe they've been dead since the first scene. It still feels weird that was treated as a dream scene, and then we never got an explanation for it happening. I think it's a little weird to not mention them really again until now. Well, there was the one scene where we say they didn't show up. I get it. They tried to. I feel like, I don't know, we could at least...
Well, it was like they were never really involved in any other parts of the movie and up until now.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Oh, we found the bodies. Put it on the news.
Yeah.
Just to give it like a proper time frame for how long has passed.
Yeah. Then Heather is freaked out by another earthquake that takes out her power. And she walks over to her closet because she hears a noise in there, and Freddy pops out. Well, the Freddy... I'm going to call him Freddy for the rest of the movie, but technically I guess he's the entity Freddy. Like, whatever. He's Freddy.
The Frentity.
Freddy. Who, well, I guess this is the first time we've actually fully seen him in this movie, so I'll say that I really like his new redesign. It's creepy. It's different.
It is darker and more evil. Yeah.
I don't love the claw. I don't love this version of the claw. I don't like how it's like weird and muscular. Like, I get it. They're trying to make it more demonic. I get it. I get what they were going for. I just don't like it visually as well.
Creature-y.
Yeah. I do love, like, his face, though. I love, like, the weird, like, his skin, like, being ripped open rather than being burned in this movie. Like, it's cool looking. It's weird. He's wearing a lot of darker colors. I will say one other thing here. So many people talk about how, in this movie, Freddy's not silly at all. Freddy jokes, like, half the time. He says it in a slightly more serious tone, and I think it works for this movie. Like, I really do like the way Freddy is portrayed in this movie. But I have seen some people talk about how, Freddy's, he's not silly at all in this movie. He makes a joke pretty much every time he opens his mouth, still in this movie. There's creepier jokes, but he's still quipping. Like, I literally heard a review that said, like, Freddy doesn't quip, like, at all in this movie. And I'm like, every time he opens his mouth, it's still a quip. Like, I agree, it's a much better done quip, and it doesn't take me out of the movie like we've talked about with, like, the other quips. I hated them.
Nearly as much as a goofball.
Yeah, I hated those
people
other...
just begging for cheese.
Yeah, I hated
like
how
Robert
he was in the other
Englund
movies.
said, he is darker.
Yeah, no, here's the thing. I want to say, no one's saying this as a complaint. They're, like, using that as, like, a praise of this movie. But it's still weird wording used, because I would argue he's still making jokes literally every time he opens his mouth. Like, here he just goes, like, remember me, I think, or something, and, like, he has, like, a couple other, like, there's other times, I'll be honest, this movie, none of them were, like, as quippy as the other ones where they, like, stuck out as so bad I had to write them down or anything close to that. Like, I didn't write down...
The only one I remember was the one in the climax of the movie where they're in hell, question mark?
It's... Yeah. I think it's the dream world hell. It's weird, yeah.
Dream hell?
Yeah, dream hell. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out there because I thought it was a really weird take. I saw, like, everywhere I saw people talking about this movie was mentioning him not joking and not quipping when I felt like he still did it every time. I didn't have a problem with it. Like, I'm not saying it as, like, this is not a complaint. This is more a complaint with the fan base. I'm mad at the fan base for saying that he doesn't do it when he does. Praise him for doing it well. Don't act like he didn't do it. But yeah, so Freddy comes out, and they have a little tussle, and he tries to, slash her. Or he does slash her. He slashes her. And
then he says, fuel injection. Just kidding,
no,
he doesn't say that.
He goes, claw marks! No, he actually doesn't, because, like I said, he's not stupid in this movie. But he does, when he talks, except for this, I guess this is the one time I can remember him specifically talking where he doesn't make a joke. He just calls her Nancy. But she ends up, getting herself awake after seems like another maybe earthquake is maybe happening. But once again, it's all in her dream, so I don't know how she woke up here, but she woke up, the bed broke, she woke up, and she realizes that her arm is really cut up, and that her room is really destroyed and all that. So now, because of this, Heather gets worried that, crap, if Freddy's attacking me, that means he's probably trying to attack Dylan too. So I'm going to go to the hospital. She goes to the hospital to see Dylan. And Jamie is here. Not Jamie. Julie. Don't know why I said Jamie. Julie is here. And the doctor is... I can't tell what word that's supposed to be.
The doctor is... a doctor.
Got it.
Skeptical?
The doctor patches her up, is what it was.
Oh.
The word was patches, and I couldn't tell what it was because there was nothing else near it. I had to flip the page to find out the rest of what that sentence was. He patches up... not he. She patches up Nancy, and we have another little scene.
No. She patches up Heather.
Same person, right? Same character? No? Okay.
Not yet.
No. Technically, she never is. That ending's a little weird. I don't mind it, but we find out that she mentions like how this happened during the earthquake, and the doctor's like, "What are you talking about? The earthquake happened weeks ago." And we find out that's where we kind of realize, oh crap, all those earthquakes, except for maybe the first one, only happened to Heather.
Yeah.
But yeah, then the doctor tells Nancy, due to like some kind of dialogue, we find out that the doctor tells Nancy again, Heather, tells Heather that Dylan was afraid of a man coming out of his bed. And Heather kind of, realizes what she's talking about and kind of, probably mistakenly, because of what it leads to, mentions that Freddy here, which makes the doctor think that she must have let Dylan watch her movies. See, she's the problem. She's the reason her kid is messed up, because she let him open his eyes to those movies, which, Heather says that she didn't. And, every kid knows Freddy. He's like Santa Claus and King Kong. Everyone knows about him. And, it's like, okay, at this point in society, for sure, yeah, no, every kid knew who Freddy was. Like there was a reason all those kids were showing up dressed like yeah, it's not... once again, this is a kind of a... It's maybe a little heavy-handed, but a heavy-handed, like, metaphor about how stop blaming the horror movies for the bad things. Stop trying to say that, the parent is bad because the kid knew what Freddy was. I don't know. I don't mind it, but it's definitely maybe a little... Some of the metaphors might be a little heavy-handed in this movie.
That didn't even occur to me until you brought it up at the beginning of the podcast, actually. But I'm also kind of blind to...
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just overanalyzing it. It's quite possible.
I mean, we're on the lookout for different things, right?
Sure. And then Heather goes to watch over Dylan in the hospital before she ends up falling asleep. And then in her dream, Dylan flatlines, but he's still alive in her dream, and he tells her that he's almost there. And then he says it again in, I think, just Freddy's voice. Like, the first time it's the kid trying to be Freddy, but then it's just Freddy's voice. And then he pukes this weird black stuff all over her. And
no one seems to bat an eye at.
Yeah, no one seems to bat an eye because all the doctors rush in at this point. And one of the doctors goes, "We have to cut the evil out of him." And oh crap, she's got the finger glove on her. And oh wait, no, she's just Freddy now. And as she goes to stab Dylan with it, Heather jumps onto the bed to stop her. I guess it is him now. It's confusing because a second ago she was the doctor, but no, now it was Freddy.
Yeah, now she is Freddy.
Yeah. So she.
And then she's awake.
She's waking up by all the nurses and the doctor running in, going, "What's going on? What are you doing?" Because wait, Dylan's not there. And we find out that it's because Dylan was taken downstairs for some more testing, and that it's just nothing to worry about. We didn't wake you up because you seemed like you needed sleep, so we let you sleep. But it checks out to them, but to Heather it doesn't because she knows what's going on. Her kid's not safe. She needs to be with her kid. So she goes to go towards him, and as she walks through the hallway, we have a nurse asking her if she has a pass. And once again, as an homage to the first movie, we have her telling her to screw your pass, like she did to the hall monitor in the first movie, which was Freddy in the dream.
That's right, yeah.
Then she eventually goes in. She talks to Dylan for a little bit. I think it's like one of the only times Dylan smiles in the whole movie is when she comes into the room.
Yeah, that's true.
Like he's got this huge smile when he sees her.
And that's it.
Yeah, that's about it. Then, well, to be fair to the kid, why else would he have smiled in this movie?
Not a ton to smile about. No, that's true.
He's been dealing with some crap in this movie. Speaking of crap, she realizes that she didn't bring him Rex, and she wants to go get him Rex. And Julie's here, so it's okay. She'll leave him with Julie. So she's going to go get Rex for him.
Not if the doctors have anything to say about
real
it.
Quick, one last thing we have to notice here is once again, call back to the first movie and technically the third movie. Julie notices as Heather's leaving that her hair has started to turn gray from the stress, like it did in the first movie, and her hair was gray in the third, or she had the streak of gray in the third movie as well, because that was a sequel to the first movie. So once again, little nod that isn't like blatant, but it's once again I think it's well done. I like the little nod, like the nods they do. We're about to get to another one that's very much a nod to the first movie.
These are more than nods.
Yeah, no,
she says, "What's going on with your hair?"
Yeah, I guess you're right. I guess it is blatant.
Like we're slipping into
you're right.
The reality to the story now.
No, you're right. No, yeah, you're right. I'm wrong. I'm completely. The more you say it,
Austin,
the more
you're so wrong.
I know. I'm
wrong.
realizing that, and I'm just like, oh, you're right. They're not nods. They're. I didn't think about the later parts of the story.
Opposite.
At this point, I'm still thinking of them as nods. But as we get later in the story, you are definitely right that they are not meant to even be nods. They're meant to be her. Yeah.
They're like head shakes, whatever, the opposite of a nod.
Sure, we'll go with that. So
full blown.
Heather leaves, and as she goes to leave, two cops escort Heather to the doctor. Then we cut back. This kind of the next scene kind of cuts back and forth. So I'll try to do my best to tell about how it happened in order, but I'll make sure to hit all the important pieces. We cut back to Julie, and some nurses are trying to give Dylan a sedative, and so she punches one of the nurses, but the other nurse also had a sedative, so they give him the sedative. Then we cut back to Heather, and the doctor tells Heather that if she has, asking her, hey, do you have any mental disorders in your family? Because if you do, they could have been passed to Dylan, and hey, we could take him away from you if we have to. Gotta protect the kid, which, once again, I like this movie. Like, one of the things I praised about the third movie, Dream Warriors, is I like this character of the doctor who is in a lot of ways the antagonist, but also isn't.
Just what a doctor should be.
They aren't. They're the antagonists of the story, but they're not the bad guy. They're literally doing their job. And the way this looks from the outside, that kid needs to be put in some protective services to help keep him safe, because his mom looks crazy.
It hasn't been letting him sleep.
Yeah.
From their diagnosis.
Yes. You know? So, like, I like when they do that nuanced, like, this is the antagonist, but only because you know what's going on. If you didn't, they're not. So, yeah. As this is happening, Dylan falls asleep, which, once he fell asleep, the Freddy appears immediately, and he starts to kill Julie. And he, like...
Oh, I was just doing the little hand motion.
I couldn't tell if you were, like, doing it in quotes. I was like, what's the quotes for him killing her? He definitely kills her.
This is a quote.
Yeah. See, to be fair, I just saw your hand move. I didn't catch all of it because I was looking down at my notes. So I was like, what did I say wrong? He definitely kills her. It, like, the most brutal death in this movie. So he drags her all up around the room, very similar to the first movie again. Yeah. Similar to the way Tina died in that movie. This time they did do something cool to make it different. That movie, we just see Tina writhing around, getting thrown around. This movie, we get to see Freddy do it, which it's a good way to, like, do the same thing, but do it different enough that it doesn't feel like you're just repeating it.
Good point.
And there is a point where the nurses come in and see her, like, just suspended in midair. And they're just like,
Then Freddy also, he does throw in a little quip, little joke, even though, you know, according to people, he doesn't at all. He does ask him if he
skin the cat.
Yeah, and then doesn't skin her, which I actually really felt like was a missed opportunity.
Yeah, a little bit of misdirection.
Like, why do you call the game "Skin the Cat" if you just throw the cat? You throwing the cat on the roof is skinning the cat.
You ever play drag the cat around on the ceiling and then throw it on the ground?
Don't get me wrong, that's a little long and a little wordy, but it's more accurate than what he did. He does not skin her.
It is a lot more accurate.
He does not skin her at all. Just saying. I expected... when he said that line, not knowing what happened in this scene, because I had never seen this movie, I was expecting about to see a, like, filleted human. Like, and we did not. So I was a little like, oh, okay.
That was like the NC-17 score.
Fair.
Sorry, that's the filleted human edition.
But yes, then Freddy kills her on the ceiling, and after he kills her, she falls to the ground. Then after they do that, Heather ends up running in, and Dylan's not there. And the doctor's like, it's okay. It's not like he could have done anything. He was sedated. And she's like, well, he sleepwalks. And then as she says that, she also realizes one of the things she had been telling him throughout this whole movie, which we have not mentioned until this point because it was not important enough to write down in the other parts of the notes, but she has repeatedly told him that home is very close. It's just across the freeway.
That is true.
She has repeated that twice before this scene, and I believe at this point she realizes that was a mistake because she realizes what that means. That's why he's not here, because he has started his way back home.
Right across the freeway.
Yeah.
While the most efficient route.
Yeah, while she's going to try to get him,
not wrong.
She does call John Saxon, who basically says she's crazy, and then she notices Dylan going up the hill onto the highway, and he's trying to walk himself home, but because he's got to get Rex, the star of the movie. I think he actually might even say that in the scene with Julie. He mentioned needing to get Rex because
I gotta go get Rex, the star of the movie.
Yeah, he says literally that line. I have to go get Rex, star of the movie. The reason we're here to watch this. But Freddy thinks he's the star of the movie, not Rex, so he grabs poor Dylan and he kind of just hangs him on his. He's also giant now for this scene because it's a dream.
He's up in the sky next to the moon,
and he's got him by one of his claws and just hanging him over traffic to, I guess, tease Heather. So Heather shows up and she sees this and she starts to cross herself and starts causing more traffic issues as a giant 18-wheeler comes at her and she has to duck out of its way. And that scene does cause the accident from Final Destination 2. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's Destination 2. I might be wrong. But yeah, which is also a New Line Cinema movie. Random fun fact. So maybe it did. Even though that scene happens in the daytime and this is definitely at night. But in my headcanon, it caused it. Even though it's also a different type of truck. But hey, it happened. It caused it. But yeah, so she where was I lost my place. Yeah, so she
saves Dylan from being dangled in the air.
After she causes the giant crash, he just decides to put Dylan down. She doesn't really even do anything. He just puts Dylan down. True. And like she looks over at him,
then she gets hit by a car.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as she gets hit by a car, Dylan also sees like this weird army of Freddys, so he runs off.
Keeps going the way he's been going.
He runs off to the house.
Gotta go get Rex.
But Heather, she ain't gonna let no car crash stop her, because she's just gonna keep trucking. She's going straight to the house, does not care. And when she gets there, she comes home and she sees the door open. She goes inside, and there it is. There's the person she's looking for. It's John Saxon. Oh, and Dylan's here too. But the first person we see is John, and he tells her. Wait, she tells him that Freddy Krueger did it, and I believe he says he tells her that. I think
he says, "Yeah, sure."
Yeah, sure. At this point, and he tells her like, "Hey, come outside and talk to me for a little bit." Yep. And then while that happens, we cut to Dylan's bed, which is shaking and starting to there's something starting to come out of it. Then while we're outside, she mentioned again that it was Freddy that did it, and he says that Fred Krueger was dead. And I believe at this point John calls her Nancy, and she questions. Yeah. She's like, John, why'd you call me that? And he immediately comes back with a, why did you call me John? As we now notice that he is now wearing his outfit from the first movie. With the badge, he is back to being, her dad character, who I think his name is Dawn. I think it's Dawn. And also, she is also changed outfits now. She is dressed like Nancy.
In her pajamas.
Yeah, she's in her pajamas.
The initial dream.
Yeah, and we kind of cut back and forth for this next scene with them talking outside about Freddy, and Freddy continuing to get more and more out of the bed before the thing that finally gets him fully out of the bed, which I don't know if that was a metaphor for her accepting this fate that causes him to get out, or if it's just a cutting back and forth thing. The thing that finally gets him to rip himself fully out of the bed is when she calls him Daddy, calls John, accepting that she is Nancy here. She is playing Nancy again, which is the line Wes Craven said in that scene we crapped on, and it will be called back at the end of the movie. So yeah, she is willing to play Nancy again here. So that gets Freddy out all the way out. And then maybe the thing that I hate the most.
Yeah, so
Nancy turns around to see the gosh darn Elm Street freaking house. No, I'm just kidding. I really
That's back, baby.
I actually didn't mind it in this movie. I had to call attention to it because I've made a big deal about the other movies where it did feel forced. This movie, it actually made sense. It made complete sense in the plot. I jokingly throw a big fit about it because at this point it's the joke. But I actually want to be fair. I had no problem with it in this movie. It made complete sense. It's literally just the facade of the outside of the house, because once she goes inside, it is still her house. And Nightmare 1 is playing on the TV again as she realizes that she sees some of, Dylan's sleeping pills on the ground. And she realizes that he must be leaving breadcrumbs for me. So...
Whoa.
This was my problem. My only beef for the movie biggest one was maybe this right here. She could have just followed the breadcrumbs, but instead she's like, these are like breadcrumbs. I think, okay, yes, thanks for spelling that out. It's this is like Hansel and Gretel. Yes, he's leaving these for me to find him.
Isaiah,
just like in Hansel and Gretel, the breadcrumbs in that very story.
People are stupid, Isaiah. We're smart literary people that know what they were doing here. Some people went, why is she following them sleeping pills? So they probably ADR'd a line of her going, it's like the breadcrumbs from the story earlier. Remember the story earlier? That's fair. It was unnecessary. We could have understood what was going on. But, hey, as they always say in, good script, it's tell, not do. Wait, no. Nope. It's not it. It's not it at all.
No, that's the opposite.
That was the joke. That was the joke, guys. I knew that wasn't the real thing. That was the joke.
I don't know if Wes Craven was really making these masterpieces like he thought he was. I don't know if he would have put that line in there.
Well, she follows the breadcrumbs
was a bunch of geniuses.
She follows those breadcrumb pills up to the saddest moment in the whole movie. It's Rex's mangled body. Our boy Rex is gone. Pour one out for him.
Devoid of stuffing.
He's ripped to shreds. It's very sad. This is not a quick little scratch like earlier that can be sewed up. I believe Rex is dead, and it is heartbreaking, and I will try to sleep tonight, but I don't know if I will be able to. She then continues to follow him into the dream world by taking more of the sleeping pills, and eventually gets under covers.
Yeah, she takes like 3 sleeping pills. I'd just like to say that.
Dude, I thought she's fixing a Jimi Hendrix or something.
Heather's trying to overdose before she gets to her kid. Jeez Louise.
I feel like
you're just following them. You don't have to.
To
eat the bread.
Well, actually, that's not true. I would argue that she definitely did not need to take 3. That's fair. But she does have to take them so she could fall asleep to follow him, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. She is literally following him into the dream world, so she did have to find a way to fall asleep immediately. So
I mean, taking one was understandable, but then she proceeded to keep eating them. I was like,
I would argue that the dosage of this would have been the size for a much smaller human being, which she might have actually needed to take 2. If it could put out the kid safely, that means it shouldn't be able to put her out as easily.
That's a good point.
She weighs more. That's like, you're right. The third one, excessive, but also probably not near OD levels because it's probably only 1 pill over what she needed to take. That's my thoughts, but hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they were just trying to kill that kid. I mean, he did keep annoyingly scream every time he woke up, so I can kind of get it. So she continues under the covers, following the covers as they continue to get longer and longer into this cool little slide. And she slides down it for a while. Then it turns into this creepy tunnel, not so cool slide. And she comes out of Freddy's mouth into a matte painting of the hell. I get it. It's definitely one of those things where it's I can't blame them. How else? The other option was trying to do this digitally, and we saw them try to do things digitally in this movie or the last movie. So I am glad they used a matte painting. But man, did it look like a matte painting when I've seen matte paintings not look like matte paintings. You could tell that she was falling onto a painting. And it was
well, there's a cool pterodactyl flying through.
It was a random pterodactyl flying through.
Morning
Rex.
Dinosaurs are from hell.
Because, dinosaurs got to stick together. And she falls into, the hell pool, as we all know is in Dream Hell thing. There's a perfect landing pool for her.
Yeah, just 1 pool of water.
Yeah, and she starts to call out for Dylan, and she begins searching for him in Dream Hell. And I will say it's got some really cool, Roman Gothic, architecture vibe to it. I like it. It's really well done. I think it looks really cool. The practical, not the painting was okay. But once we get to the practical set, it's got a cool vibe to it. Then Heather finds the script of the movie. She reads a little bit of it, and then... what's that behind her? It's a jump scare. Oh, it's just Dylan. Don't worry. It wasn't Freddy. He even says it's just me. So it's just Dylan. Don't be afraid, guys. I know you were afraid, but it's not. It's just Dylan. Don't worry. But then it's not just Dylan because Freddy's here too, and he
hands on pillars.
Yeah, and he throws Heather into a snake room. Cause every dream hell has a snake room. But she kind of fights him off.
Delivers one of the quippiest quips in the movie.
Yeah, he tells her something about
pick out a pet for your Rugrat, B-word.
Yeah. Once again, like I said, here's the thing. It is quippy, but he was delivered in a way that it didn't feel super quippy. Yeah. But it's still there, and I don't get why people act like it isn't. Maybe it's just because after watching those last 2 movies especially, you go, well, it's not that bad, but it is still there.
Quip?
Yeah.
That made sense.
Yeah.
How dare you?
He didn't go, snakes, water, eels. So, I mean, to be fair, I guess it was well done. Because there is also not a snake when she picks up one. She picks up an eel and stabs him in the eye with it for some reason.
Yeah, jams it in his eye.
It becomes rigid. She
Yeah. She uses the eel knife that everyone has in their snake room Come on, guys.
Yeah.
Uh,
The one knife amongst my plethora of snakes and eels.
Yeah, so she fights him off for a little bit, including grabbing a torch and I guess maybe trying to set him on fire, but just hits him with a torch and it does nothing. So she drops it and runs away. He chases her for a little bit, not for long though, because he knocks her out and she's stuck in like the pool of water from earlier. She's kind of knocked out. So then he decides to... Wait, sorry. Not yet. I jumped. After he chases her, Dylan comes out and stabs him in the knee. Then he throws her into the water, and he decides, I guess I'll chase Dylan.
He chucks her around a few times.
He chucks her around, but he doesn't knock her out yet.
This is probably one of the most egregious parts of the movie, is where like they have this climactic fight scene where like Freddy has her by the neck multiple times and then just like chucks her to a pillar for no reason.
It's a final girl
instead
fight.
of just killing her.
It's a final girl fight. You gotta do it.
I get it, but also, yeah, he really could have just killed her at any point in time during this entire sequence. It's like, it never felt as obvious as it does right in this specific part. Just because there's so many situations where she's like pinned up against the wall helpless.
Oh, one of the times that she's pinned up against the wall, I think it's actually in this scene, she's actually... like in this, hell dimension thing, there's like a lot of like words of sins behind her, like on the wall, and she specifically put on the word lust, which, and I actually think this is actually something that I think was intentional. The reason he doesn't kill her there is because it is supposed to evoke the weird relationship they've had since the start of, is he gonna choke her or is he about to like kiss her? Which I think that's something that Robert Englund himself actually mentioned about this scene. So I actually think him not killing her was intentional. And I'm not saying it's not still a flaw. I'm saying it was at least an intentional flaw of he wasn't trying to kill her here. He pins her up against the word lust because it represents the origin of his creepiness towards her and all that. He is her boyfriend now, if you remember from the first movie. So, and she is playing Nancy again because she said daddy, so she is Nancy. So, just saying. I will defend most of this movie, and this is one of the things I'll defend.
That's fair.
And while he's got her pinned up against the wall, this is when it happened. This is when he little kid runs up and stabs him in the knee. And that gets Freddy angry, so Freddy throws her away from him, and she lands and gets kind of like knocked out in the pool of water, and he starts chasing Dylan for a little while. One of the places he chases him, he's like chasing up some like stairs at one point, and this is actually... kind of we talked about earlier, Robert Englund likes to scare children, and Wes Craven asked him, "Hey, could you scare this kid at some point, for real, to try to like get a really cool scene?" And Wes Craven's like, "Yeah, of course, I can scare anyone." So there's a scene where the kid like runs up the stairs and Freddy jumps out at him, and the kid then runs off scared, and that's legit. Like he legitimately did not know Freddy was going to jump out at him there. They did that to scare the kid. So yeah,
that's really funny.
Yeah. So then he chases Dylan for a little bit more. He ends up chasing him to a furnace, very similar to the Hansel and Gretel story. Remember that? We're gonna hit you over the head of that a little bit here.
Or where Freddy was originally burned in,
or the very beginning of this movie.
We watched Freddy's Dead, the artful movie. Freddy's Dead. He just gets thrown with some Molotov cocktails in his basement.
Yeah.
I mean, also to be fair, there was also the television show called Freddy's Nightmares that was like kind of canon, but was mostly just like it was their version of like the Crypt Keeper. It was Freddy mostly just telling stories, and one of them was the original story of like child killer Fred Krueger, where he was also like burned alive by a mob. So I don't think it's supposed to be where Freddy was burned.
Oh, I wasn't saying where. I was just saying it's reminiscent of him.
Sorry. Well, I got to bring up Freddy's Nightmares, which is the first time and only time we'll ever mention that on here. Because that is a television show, and therefore we would never do a review of it. Also, it's not good from my understanding. But yeah, so he chases him into the furnace, but he's actually not... He's too big to get in the furnace, so only Dylan's able to get in there. So he does some stretchy arm stuff.
Classic.
Yeah, did it in the first movie when he chased Tina, so it is literally a classic thing. I will also say, I think this point on in this whole final fight scene is a little silly. Like, everything Freddy does here comes across as less scary and just silly. The way he stretches his arm here, the way he's about to stretch his head, the tongue thing, which, yeah, it's creepy for him to wrap his tongue around her, but it's not scary. It's kind of cartoonish.
Dude, I was fixing to say the opposite.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Maybe I'm just a pansy, but yeah, I thought the head stretching thing was...
I mean, the head stretching thing was...
one of the creepier things I've seen in this franchise. So
I will say the head stretching thing was a really well done practical effect, but when you add it in with those other two is why I felt like it still felt like weird cartoony thing he could do. But
I think it was cool, and it probably was a much better effect at the time.
Also true. Maybe I could also be looking at it with 2022 eyes, where I go, well, that's obviously a costume, and to be fair to the original intention, maybe that might be on me. I will, but the tongue thing is awful. The tongue thing is stupid. I won't take anything about the tongue thing being actually good. That looks like a cartoon.
I thought that added to the creepiness. That's just me.
Yeah, to each their own. We can have different opinions, and we can keep doing this amazing podcast, even though you're wrong and I'm right.
Oh, definitely. I feel like the whole tongue thing was supposed to play off of his weird sexual.
Oh, it does. It's definitely the intention, but it's literally his tongue is like a giant snake and wraps around her, and looks like Laffy Taffy. And yeah.
I thought you were talking about when his tongue flipped around.
Oh no! I have no problem with the tongue in the giant head. That's fine. I'm talking about when literally the next part of the scene
snakes around her.
Yeah. So after he does,
my mind had blotted that out.
After he does the long arm, he pulls the kid in. His head stretches. He does a little tongue thing there, reminiscent of what he's done in the past.
I could just eat you up.
Once again, a quip.
A quote of Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah, once again, but it's still delivered in a sense that also still kind of quippy. You're right, it's a direct quote from the story they're referencing. You're right. But once again, kind of quippy. So he does quip. I will not stand by this quip erasure of this movie. But yeah, so after he pulls him in, he does the head thing, which is fine. I don't mind it. I don't mind the stretchy arm really either. It's really the tongue that's about to happen. Because after he does
about the tongue.
Nancy runs... Yeah. No, I guess, Nancy Heather, because she is Nancy now at this point. She said she was willing to play her again. So Heather, I didn't misspeak. Heather runs up and stabs him with a knife, which makes him let go Dylan, who goes past a random snake because snakes look cool, I guess. It's kind of creepy, but it definitely feels like, I guess it's supposed to be an obstacle Dylan has to face before he can save his mom in a second. But it's just a snake that doesn't do anything because it's a python that just sits there.
Yeah.
And it's
I was going to say, anyone who knows anything about snakes would be like, oh, that's just a python.
Yeah.
It's just going to be like, eh.
Yeah, the snake is just sitting there. And so he goes past the snake, and while he's doing this, Freddy is inside the furnace at this point. And he sticks his head out through the bars and wraps his tongue around Nancy repeatedly, and then his tongue's kind of still waggling around, and it looks really cheesy. And then the kid runs up and stabs it with a knife, splitting it into two.
After a very cartoony thing of him trying to stab the tongue, and it's
you're right, exactly. Why I don't like this part of the scene, and maybe to be fair to the rest of the scene before it, I'm blaming all of it on him being cartoony when he wasn't earlier in the movie. But the other stuff was done well. This was the second time in the movie that kind of took me out, where I was like, all right, this is some weird 4 or 5, Freddy. This isn't the Freddy we've been seeing in this movie. But yeah, so
darker.
After he after he gets the tongue stabbed,
rubber ear.
He recoils his tongue. It's now forked for the rest of his scene, which is kind of cool. I like the continuity that his tongue is forked the next time you see his tongue. But yeah, they close the furnace on him, and he burns up. And as he burns up, he turns into his true demon entity form and melts. Yeah. And the special effects don't fully hold up here. But once again,
he looks very silly.
I won't blame this movie for that. That's not fully there. It's a product of the time.
Product of the time.
It is a little awkward. But while this is happening, the dream world is also starting to, as he's burning, the dream world is starting to like explode. So Dylan and Heather, they run to escape, and they make it to that pool just in time, and they know how to get out of the dream world somehow. So they submerge themselves in the water, which takes them out of the dream world, falling out of his bed, and she finds the script. And it's got a note from Wes Craven, and it gives her a message of thanks. Thanks for playing Nancy one last time. And then, also at the end of it, it talks, like, once again goes over the dialogue that's about to happen, which is Dylan asking her, hey, is this a story? She's like, yeah, it's just a story. Can you read it to me? And she starts by reading the beginning of this movie. And then we go to the credits.
Implying that this movie was the sealing of Freddy again, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that part of it is a little weird. I don't know how I feel about that. But
perfectly tying up any plot holes you think might be in this movie.
Yeah,
so
I guess that's true.
Have that, critics.
I will say, as I've said already, though, I do really like this movie. There are definitely things I have that are issues, but it's hard for me to know for sure. I mean, I guess if you've been watching before, you know that I wasn't a huge fan of the first one. I did love the second one. I enjoyed most of the third one. We won't talk about 4, 5, and 6. But I think this one might be my favorite. It felt like, I don't know, it felt better. It was better. One of my favorite horror movies before getting into Horror Bois, one of the only ones I ever liked was Scream. And part of why I liked it is the meta-ness of it. This movie does meta well. Yeah, I liked it. I've already said the one thing I didn't like. Literally everything else I enjoyed, or if I didn't love it, it was a momentary, that's weird, and then I went right to, oh, this is great though. Like, it was, I loved the story. Wes Craven, he is the greatest storyteller ever. That's how he was able to pull this off. I agree with him. I can't deny it. That's my thoughts. I liked it. I liked it a lot. It's probably my favorite. My favorite might be 2, which I know a lot of, the internet's going to be mad about that. But it's either 2 or this one is my favorite of the whole franchise, which, that's my thoughts so far. I guess technically we're not done with the franchise yet, so I guess I shouldn't tell you what my for sure favorite is yet. But
it's probably going to be the new one. Probably going to be the Friday the 13th remake.
Yeah, for sure.
As your favorite nightmare movie.
Yeah.
The one about Jason.
Yeah. What's your thoughts, Chris?
I liked a lot of this movie. But I didn't like it nearly as much as Austin did. I don't know. I thought it was good. And maybe it's just because I am spoiled by like the Scream movies, which Wes Craven also made, but I feel like they did like meta horror and meta humor better in those movies, and this kind of just felt like a test run for Scream. And it's not a bad one. It just doesn't feel as good as any of the Scream movies.
I'm going to completely disagree on that because you have not rewatched Scream 3 or 2 in a long time. Some of those movies get rough. I will agree that this Scream 1 and maybe 5 are definitely better than this. But no, there's Scream 3 is a rough movie.
And that's fair. That is fair. What I meant more was that it just doesn't feel as good as the first Scream.
No, I knew what you meant, but I wanted to make sure it was out there that I was not going to let you put Scream 3 above this movie.
And that's fair. That is fair. And I don't think I would after watching Scream 3. At least in recent history. I have watched it at some point, and there's a reason I've only watched it once, I'm sure. But yeah, I don't know. It was a good time. There was definitely the parts of it where it felt like it became a little bit too meta for its own good. And I was like, all right, let's calm down and take it back a little bit.
Which it definitely was. Like, legitimately, it definitely was too meta for its own good, in the sense of this movie is the worst movie at the box office. This movie this movie did the absolute worst. And yeah, it people were not ready for this. One of the things that I think Wes Craven himself has said that he thinks one of the flaws he might have made was this movie was meta horror for people in the horror who were like for the people who work in horror compared to Scream. Why Scream worked better was it was meta horror for horror fans. It was done in that like teenage perspective, the audience they actually wanted to get into the theaters. This movie isn't that, and it did sadly. Even though I would say there is no way in my mind this isn't at the very least in the top 50% of these movies for sure, no matter which way. Like, but it's for some reason is the worst, and like that means Freddy's Dead did better than this, and that is the biggest travesty I think maybe in all of cinema.
That's an injustice.
Yeah, I would say at this point, putting it in my personal rankings, I would say it's probably Nightmare 1, this movie, and then Nightmare 2 for me. Isaiah?
I say what?
He was just cueing to you.
Okay. Well, I am going to make the brash claim that this is the best Nightmare movie.
Oh my god!
I respect that.
Yes. For one, you have to admit that this is an incredibly well-written and original story. And on top of that, it's acted really well.
That is,
and the acting ties it all together. Like, Heather is always afraid from the very first minute that we see her. And so there's no transition there's no, like, her slowly... I mean, we do see her slowly realizing what her fear is, but we don't open up with a peaceful scene that's interrupted by conflict. It's like right off the bat, she is already adopting the personality of the character that she's been playing, right? Of being afraid of this monster. And that starts from the very, very beginning. And so, like, we're noticing from that very first dream sequence, or what we're seeing with Heather is, like, Nancy kind of in embryo already off the bat. You know, Nancy's always there on the screen. So that tension is maintained. Really good. All pinned down by really good acting on Heather's part. Got to give a nod to the fact that it's back to the basics. We've got a kid afraid of monsters. Very fundamental, very primal. Also undergirded by fairy tale, like Hansel and Gretel, but the fairy tales in general, you know. Watch out for the monster that's going to eat you. That's very, I don't know. That's very deep, a deep mode of storytelling, you know, that I think Craven's trying to recognize. On that note, I feel like we have to distinguish his explanation in this scene that y'all aren't big fans of from the cheap fake mythologies of the previous movies. Because, and I haven't quite pinned down personally like what makes this one so different, but when we're thinking about like, oh, the 3 dream demons of the last one, or like, oh, you know, the rhyme of the Dream Warrior or the Dream Lord, you know, these things that they just kind of come up with on the fly and they just feel. Yes, I'm sorry, the Dream Master. Yeah, excuse me.
It's okay. I respect you for being able to block it out.
That's like, but they're so hasty, and I think on top of that, they feel hasty because they're so specific, and they introduce the exact trait of like these monsters that they just kind of like toss together, and they're just trying to come up with these whole mythologies with a few pieces, you know. And this one is, I don't know what makes it different, but it is. I think it's because like it's trying to encapsulate
a little bit more vague,
which doesn't on its face seem like a better quality, but I think it's trying to get it like a universal role of storytelling of realizing fears and making them into a real phenomenon. It's giving them shape.
It kind of reminds me of some of Stephen King's work. I know like he's been one to like say that like the evil in The Shining might be Pennywise. Like they might technically be like the same giant evil entity that controls all of the evil in his universe. And I feel like this is something definitely. I think Wes Craven was going for something similar. Of, you know, this is a horrible evil thing that's always been there, and you know, Freddy is just the new encapsulation of that.
Well, I think there's validity to that kind of language, universe, that sort of thing. But I think it's bigger than that. I think he's just trying to describe a core role of storytelling, like in humanity, where storytelling has the power to like give shape and mold these phenomena these like kind of undefined fears of ours into real things that we can recognize and grapple with. Last night, it's kind of cool that Robert Englund never appears with the real Freddy. Obviously, we know that it's not him because the whole point of the movie is showing us that, like, oh, Freddy's actually a real thing. He's distinct from this character that the actor just played on screen. But nonetheless, the movie kind of suggests that he's also possessed of the same Freddiness, like Wes and Nancy and eventually John, too. He's kind of sucked into it. But with him, since he played Freddy, he seems to be kind of relishing the evil. It's interesting. I wonder personally if we're meant to believe that maybe Robert Englund, the character, was the one making those calls. I don't know. That would be kind of like a werewolf situation where, like, oh, every once in a while, Robert Englund turns him into Freddy. Or who knows? Just a fun thought. But
talking about
overall,
the second Nightmare film, that was a werewolf story.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. That was absolutely a werewolf story.
Yeah.
But I liked 1. I liked 2. My ranking might be Chris's. The only way I'd shift is that I might put this one above 1 because I think the story is just a really well-told story, and the acting puts it over the top. So,
I also want to throw in one last praising of this movie, and it's something that Chris kind of hit on in a negative way, is how, like, this was a, what's the word you used? Like a
prototype?
Yeah, like a prototype or something like that. And the thing is, like...
Test drive.
A test drive, yeah. It's like the thing... Power drive of... No, but no, this movie...
Anti-lock brakes.
This movie deserves so much... I feel like so much credit in that. Like, it's so easy to go, well, yeah, but he did it better with Scream, or Cabin in the Woods does meta better, or Tucker and Dale versus Evil does meta better. But this was, like, the first ever meta horror. Like, this did it. It's become a genre... Mostly probably thanks to Scream more than this, and that's fair. Wow, poor Wes Craven. He didn't get it on his first try; he got it on his second try. But like, the fact that this even exists is crazy, and it's part of why it didn't work. For some reason, 2 years before, they weren't ready. The audiences weren't ready for this weird meta horror of, why are they saying Heather? I thought she was Nancy. Like, there were probably people who were like, this doesn't make sense. Why is she, she's the actor? Like, it's a weird concept on paper. Like, I get it. I mean, there's a reason it didn't work overall. And there's a reason why what you said is true. It is, in a sense, a prototype for a better movie in Scream. I do like Scream more. But this movie deserves credit for doing it first.
I think this is better than Scream.
Well, you're wrong. I'm just kidding. I don't. That's fine. I'm joking.
The whole point of Scream is that it's predictable.
I feel like that first one isn't as predictable the first time you go into it.
The first time you watch it.
They
explain why it is.
They cover the horror tropes, but they also... This isn't the Scream podcast. We're doing that like in January of next year.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, can't give away all our opinions.
We've been talking, I'm almost certain, for 2 hours. So...
Oh my god.
So...
We're cutting it.
I will say, this has been this week's Horror Boys. We will be back next week for Freddy versus Jason. The Titans of Horror will collide... And we'll see if we like the movie. I've heard differing reviews, mostly negative though. So let's give our own opinion next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.